Welcome to the Theater Ovation podcast edition. Today we are talking with John Luttrell, a local actor and singer and all-around good, talented guy who lives right here in the area. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you doing this for us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to talk to John. I've known John for a very long time. We've done a couple of shows together, so this is actually a pleasure for me as well to be able to do this podcast with him. So we're just going to be learning a little bit about John and his theater background and just basically chatting for a bit and talking about all sorts of fun and exciting things. So let's get started. So John, how long have you been doing theater and how did you get started in the realm of the theatricalness?
So the first time that I can really think of that I remember performing was it was at a program with my elementary school. I started in probably first grade, second grade, something like that, but it was called Odyssey of the Mind. And in this program, students are given a set of, they call them problems, these long-term problems, and they work over the course of weeks or even really months preparing a creative solution to this, whatever their particular problem is, and they present that solution in the form of like a skit. I think some of the ones that I remember doing in our group, one was about the volcano at Pompeii. There was one that involved mad cow disease. And then I think the very first one, it had something to do with fruits and vegetables. I don't know if it was eating your fruits and vegetables or what the deal was, but that was the first time that I can really remember performing on stage in front of people. Did that for a few years in elementary school. Toward, I guess it was fifth grade, I joined the elementary school band. So my brother had been in the marching band in high school, and he played percussion. And I knew I wanted to play something different, so I had to find a different instrument, and I decided to play the trumpet. So learning how to play the trumpet is where I learned to read music for the first time and understand those, basic musical theory concepts. I played in fifth and sixth grade, and then moving on into seventh and eighth grade. And going into high school, I remembered being around my brother when he was in the band and knowing how much time that it took from band camps in the summer and football games and competitions, particularly in the fall. And I wasn't really prepared to take on that type of time commitment going into my freshman year of high school. So my plan had been to just do concert band. So basically just doing it in the spring versus fall and spring. Something happened in the guidance office when they were working on my schedule freshman year, and it never made it onto my schedule.
Well, there you go.
And I wasn't really going to push the issue. So I knew at some point I needed to take a fine art, but I was like, I'll deal with that later. I don't really come from a musical family or performing family per se. I do have one cousin Donna, she plays multiple instruments, sings, she's great. But other than that, I don't think anyone in my family would describe themselves as a performer or a musician. So it was getting close to senior year, and I was like, okay, I have to have some sort of art to graduate. I couldn't jump back into band at that point. I mean, I could have, but it wouldn't have made a lot of sense. I wasn't going to take art class because I'm a horrid drawer, painter. I can't do anything along those lines. At that point, at the high school I went to, Tennessee High in Bristol, we didn't have a theater or drama class. The previous teacher had retired and they'd not replaced her. So at that point, it was just a club, like an extracurricular thing. And I had some friends who were involved, and they were doing a production of Little Shop of Horrors. This was, I guess, my junior year of high school. So they convinced me to audition. I had never done anything like that before, never been involved with an actual show other than those little skits we'd done for Odyssey of the Mind. And I'd certainly never really sung in front of people outside of children's choir things at church, which I don't think those really count, or at least not for me.
Right, no.
But I auditioned with my group of friends, and I did the voice of Audrey too.
Okay.
Um, so I didn't actually have to act in front of people in that capacity. So I
Mm,
just sat up in the light booth and said lines and
nice.
sang. Um, but it was in that process that I actually sort of tried to learn what singing was. I already knew how to read music, but I'd never had to sing it. I just you with a trumpet, you push the valves down and you blow the
Right.
right amount of air and the sound comes out,
There you go.
hopefully. Singing is there's a lot more involved.
Right, right.
And so kind of learning through that process how to differentiate one octave from another in your singing voice and all
Hmm.
that. So we had some extra backup vocals that were involved in that program who were from the school choir, the madrigal group that we had, and I was friends with them, and they encouraged me to audition for that group, and it was we finished up the play that spring, and so it was over that later that spring, I guess, that we they had auditions for the madrigal group, and so I auditioned, and I was lucky enough to be chosen. And so that was my senior year of high school is actually when I started singing, like actually singing.
Wow.
So yeah, so a little bit
Wow.
later than some people probably do.
Yeah, well, I didn't, like I said, I've known John for a long time. I actually didn't know that. So I'm learning new stuff. So that's really, I didn't know that it was your senior year. That's
Yeah,
insane.
yeah,
That's great.
I was a late performing wise.
You could never tell.
Is I actually started out just because, and I think a lot of guys do this just because they don't really know what they're doing vocally.
Hmm.
Started out as a bass singer.
Right.
Actually, believe it or not, that year made it to all-state choir as a bass, which
Yes, look at you.
I'm certainly not one of those these days. And then, but it just felt easier to me.
Yeah, of course.
Um, the director, Mr. Brownlee, he wanted me to be a tenor because he knew better, but
Hmm.
I didn't at the time, so
Yeah.
I struggled to reach low notes, which I still do. Um,
Mhm.
but anyway, so that's really where singing happened. I didn't pick back up with the actual like acting side of things until it was actually that same fall. I auditioned for my first ever show with a community theater. It was at Theater Bristol, and they were doing a production of The Wizard of Oz that year. So this would have been in 2003, I think.
Okay.
Um, so I auditioned. I had some other friends who were going to audition, and then I'm, of course, as we all do, we meet friends in the process. But
Hmm.
so I was cast as, and again, at about 17 years of age, cast as the wizard in this production of The Wizard of Oz. So I had to put this really horrific looking gray hair dye in my hair, and yeah, um, it looked a little creepy, but
Yay, theater.
yeah. So that was my first like community theater acting experience, and then the Madrigal group at Tennessee High, they do a spring show that's more of a written play kind of thing. It's usually an original work. So that's really where it started, and that started the whole journey of singing and doing shows. From that point, beyond that, it was more sparse in terms of actually doing things on stage. I went to college after finishing high school. I would come home in the summers and do shows at the community theater. But most of my performance was actually with choirs on campus. I went to Clemson University in South Carolina, sang with a few different ensembles there. I think by the time my senior year rolled around, I was actually singing with three different vocal ensembles
Oh,
there.
wow.
So concert nights were a little stressful.
I would say so.
They were all about you had to have your music memorized,
Hmm.
which if I was just singing with the men's choir, just singing with the SATB choir or whatever, it'd be fine. But then I would have like three whole sets of music to have memorized. So,
Right.
but yeah, it was a lot of music. We
Yeah.
had the opportunity as a vocal ensemble, the larger group, to perform with the university orchestra a couple of times. So I got to do some featured solo things with them at one point. So that was kind of a cool experience. But
Oh, yeah.
that's sort of the history and first part of my singing and performing life, and
Yeah.
it all just kind of has kept going from there.
Wow. That's really great. Like, Yeah, I definitely, like I said, I didn't know that you got into it a little bit later, but you definitely got into it and you just took off, and that's awesome, for sure. So, do you think that like playing the trumpet, do you think that helped with the breathing aspect of? Because I know a lot of things within like playing instruments and singing, there's a lot of diaphragm and breathing and stabilization. And do you think playing the trumpet helped lead you into to things with your singing, or are those completely different entities in their own right?
Probably the one piece that translates more to vocal music from playing a wind instrument is knowing how and when to breathe.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Because I mean, sometimes in a instrumental piece you're playing, you'll have to sneak a breath in somewhere. And the same goes for choral music.
Mhm.
There's not a specified place where everyone takes a breath, so you have to sneak it in.
Yep.
But when you're thinking about like a solo instrumentalist and a solo vocalist, the thought process of when to breathe is really identical
Yeah.
because you're each telling a story with the song that you're performing,
Absolutely.
and knowing when to breathe is it's so important because
Hmm.
that's how you keep if you're in the middle of a phrase and you take a breath when it doesn't make sense, your
Yeah.
audience, you lose them.
You
You
lose
lose them
it.
a little
Yeah.
bit.
Especially, yeah, like you're saying, especially if it's a very emotional piece and you take a breath right when you're in this moment and the audience is like, oh God, here he comes. And then you stop. They're like, well, okay.
Think of a trumpet player playing the national anthem, and it's you get to the part, or the land of the free, and they're holding out the free, and then
Yeah.
they stop in the middle and then pick back up. It loses it.
It does.
And,
Yeah.
and same thing with a vocalist. If you don't know when to take that moment appropriately, granted,
Hmm.
most people aren't going to stop in the middle of a word,
Right.
but it applies. So yeah, I think
Absolutely.
instrumental and vocal music, the fundamentals are the same.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, speaking of, your theater process, and I know that you said you started out at Theater Bristol, Wizard of Oz, which I actually remember that happening, when it first started. Well, when it comes to theater, what is your favorite part of theater? Like, what is something that when you start thinking of theater, like, man, this is why I love doing what I do?
It's the
Uh,
process of rehearsing, of learning what you're doing, getting to know whatever character you're playing, getting to know the people around you. I think those relationships, whether they're the ones between characters or just the camaraderie that's developed backstage, I think that's probably my favorite part of the whole thing is just that process of working through it. And a lot of times they're not the most fun parts in the moment. It's the hard work, but it's one of those things. If you don't put in that work the way it should be done on the front end, it's not nearly as rewarding after the
so true.
fact. I think it's augmented when you are working with directors, whether it be the main director of a show or a music director, whoever, who quite frankly really know what they're doing
Mhm.
and can really work with you and guide you through the process and help you explore. That they give you that freedom to explore while also keeping you on track.
Right.
There's a really delicate balance there of a director who is open to letting things happen somewhat organically, but who still has their hand around the reins
Right.
of this thing that's progressing forward.
Right.
I think I've found that when I think back on shows that I've done, the ones that have felt the most rewarding and the ones that still stick with me, it's never the performance that I remember. It's the process.
Hmm.
It's those moments, whether it be a late night working with a director and a scene partner, picking something apart, really trying to dig into it to figure out the meaning between the lines on the page. Those are the things that I love the most. They really are.
Hmm. Oh no, I totally agree. I am, well, as you know, a lot of what I do with theater is music direction, and so it's always really cool for me, as I'm sure it is everyone else that's involved with whatever production it is that's going on, is like you said, the process, but just watching things come together and watching it from day one to where it ends up when it, on tech week, or the night before it opens. And that's just something great for me. Or when you're teaching these notes and for the first time that 3-part harmony hits and you're like, oh my God, I love everything. So yeah, no, the process, absolutely. I see where you're coming from with that. It's definitely a really great experience to be a part of, no matter you're playing, what role you have within the show, definitely.
And that's not to say that performing isn't great. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
that's what you're ultimately leading up to. I mean,
Mhm.
you put in all the hours and the late nights
Yeah.
and all the hard work and the vocal damage and everything else just to get to that point. And so there is an element of payoff that feels really, really good. And I think hearing that applause
Oh, yeah.
is it's addictive.
Mhm.
And
Oh, yeah.
I don't think people would come back and do show after show if there weren't that addictive property.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you'll get a chance to really sink your teeth into a piece that has the potential to touch an audience in a way that maybe you and they weren't expecting. So that's also a really cool experience when you can make that connection with an audience, and even people who may not be theater lovers, people who think theater is kind of inaccessible, it's not really for them, it's not something they think they like. But when you can connect with that person and change their mind. You change their mind about the art form. Maybe you change their mind about the subject matter that the show is about. When you really shift that perspective, I think you can feel that on stage as a performer, especially if you're fortunate enough to be performing in a smaller, more intimate venue where you can really see the faces of the people that you're performing for.
Hmm.
There's something really special and irreplaceable about that when that's able to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So and speaking of shows, you have done a lot. I have watched you over the years, just show after show, back to back, man, and you're killing it at everything that you do. You're so talented, and you just have this passion and this presence that's just John, and it's just amazing, and I love it. And I've gotten to watch you also, since I've done some shows with you, watch you grow as a performer, which has been amazing for me. So, but let's tell our audience a little bit. What are some shows that you've done, and what has been your favorite, if you can even name a favorite that you've done out of all of them?
Gosh, I mean, going back, like I said, back to 2003 really was when the first real show with the Wizard of Oz. Which, well, I mean, before that, Little Shop at Tennessee High. I mean, that was the first. That was sort of the genesis of all of this. There's no way I can remember everything that I've done. And I think picking a favorite show would be like picking a favorite child
Yeah,
or pet or something.
right.
Just but they're so different.
Of course.
I could do like a top 10 or 15 in certainly no particular order.
Okay, yeah, go
Um,
for it.
I think so. There was The Last 5 Years, Rent, Next to Normal, Spring Awakening, American Idiot, Les Mis, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Spamalot, Songs for a New World, Urinetown, Smokey Joe's Cafe, 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, Cats, which you and
I remember Cats.
we have plenty of stories about that one.
Yes.
The Drowsy Chaperone, Avenue Q. In terms of picking a favorite, I mean, and those are just a few. I mean, there's so many others. I mean, especially when you throw in little, one-time only cabaret events or
Oh, yeah.
musical reviews. I've done, several review productions. There've been holiday events, all kinds of things like that. Picking a favorite, I think I could probably pick shows that were favorites for different reasons.
Right.
When we go back to discussing process, I think probably my favorite show from a process perspective would have been The Last 5 Years. I did that with Jonesboro Repertory Theater.
Mm-hmm.
So for those who don't know The Last 5 Years, it's a story, a song cycle. So there's very little actual like spoken lines. There are some, but very few. The rest of it is just constant music, and it's two people, one male, one female. They play the characters Jamie and Kathy. The story is the story of their relationship over the course of 5 years. And the cool part is that Kathy sings the story in reverse chronological order. So she sings it from the beginning or the end of their relationship to the beginning, and Jamie starts at the beginning and works toward the end. And in the middle of the show, their stories intersect, and that's when they get married, is when that happens. the director of that show, Jonathan McCarter, who actually my co-star in that show, who played Kathy, Becca Miller at the time. She and Jonathan are now married, so that's fun. They're still fantastic friends. But Jonathan's approach to directing that show was, I think, far more detailed than anyone would ever anticipate for that show. The music is written by Jason Robert Brown, who I mean, one of the most famous musical theater composers of the past couple of decades. And his music really, by and large, speaks for itself and can really stand on its own. He understands how to write pieces that dig at the depths of the human experience, particularly when it deals to love and loss. And a lot of the rehearsals that we had, we didn't necessarily sing a single note. So for a musical that is almost nothing but singing, there were rehearsals where the piano wasn't touched. And that was so important to the final quality of that production and to our understanding of what those characters were going through. And so I really appreciate that. So from the process perspective, that would probably be my favorite. If I'm looking at a show that was probably the most rewarding or energizing to perform, I think I've got to go with Les Mis. Les Mis, I did that with Encore Theatrical Company in Morristown, Tennessee. Probably the largest scale production, or at least it felt that way, that I've been involved with. Micah Shane Brewer was our director for that production. For anyone who's not ever been to or been part of a show at Encore, I mean, yes, they are technically a community theater, volunteers doing everything for the most part, but they don't think of themselves in that way. It was every bit as technically full scale as you could get. I mean, we had a set change where we changed from just our regular set and things detached and flipped around and hooked back together to form the barricade that, I kid you not, the set change got applause during the show. And just the singing those songs in front of packed house after packed house, it was just an experience that I have never and hopefully will never forget. So that would probably be a favorite in that regard. And there's just been so many others. Just shows will come into your life at a certain point, and if you're lucky, they'll be the exact thing that you need at that point in your life.
Yeah.
I think that can influence your performance in positive ways. I think of shows like Next to Normal, very difficult subject matter, very difficult to deal with. So the character I played in that show was Henry. So he's the boyfriend. He's not one of the main, nuclear family members that are at the center of that story. But he is in a very complex relationship with Natalie in that show. At the same time, I had some very complex things going on in my personal life. And so I was able to bring those to that character. That can be good and bad. Sometimes theater serves as an escape from what's going on in your day-to-day life. It allows you to completely detach and be someone else. Sometimes in that case, you have to dig even deeper into what's going on in your day-to-day life, and sometimes it can be unhealthy if you don't know how to take care of yourself during that process. So that's also something important, but that's another one that I think just the process of working through that character and balancing Henry with John in real life, there's parts of that process that still stick with me and that I still remember.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree. There have been a lot of shows that I've done, and the songs, they came at a time when I was going through something that was similar to something that a character was going through, and man, the song just hits differently. And then when you're singing it or when you're teaching it, you're a part of it more so because you're so emotionally invested into it more, because at that moment you're absolutely in the middle of what you relate to.
I'll tell you a fun story about a song
Yeah, please do.
in particular that I kind of had to pull inspiration from to get to the point where I needed to be. So it was in the production of Rent that I did with Rogersville
Yep.
Playhouse. So I played the character Collins, um, who for those I'm sure everyone who's listening probably is familiar with the story of Rent,
It better be.
whether they've seen it on stage or seen the movie or something. So Collins in Act Two, Collins is in a relationship with a character named Angel. And spoiler alert, Angel does pass away in the story. And there is a funeral that occurs. So Collins has to eulogize Angel in song. And it's actually with a reprise of a song that they performed together earlier in the show. It's called I'll Cover You. It's a very happy, upbeat duet earlier in the show. But it becomes a very somber moment when he reprises that during the funeral. And then, of course, the song ends with a little bit of influence from Seasons of Love, which is the song that everybody knows from Rent.
Mm-hmm.
So to get myself to that point of what I would feel like if I were standing there at a funeral of someone who had meant that much to me in that way, it's different than just thinking about, a family member or something like that. I mean, the relationship that Collins and Angel share is so unique and so special, and it transcends everything else that happens in that show. So I didn't really, at that point in my life, I wasn't sure where to go to pull that feeling out. So rather than a lot of people would probably think of a funeral or someone that they're close to passing away.
Right.
So in my mind, every time I performed that song, I actually went to a wedding in my mind.
Okay.
So the wedding that I kept thinking about was of a person who had meant a great deal to me, a very great deal, who invited me to their wedding. It had been maybe a year or so before that. I can't remember, maybe a couple of years. I felt the same way at that person's wedding as I would have at a funeral.
Oh,
It felt like a very final losing someone.
Yeah.
That was the only way I could try and relate to that feeling.
Wow.
So every night when I walked through the door, and of course the line that immediately precedes that song, he says, "It's over."
Ugh.
That's what Colin says. He says, "It's over."
Yeah.
And he walks out. He's holding his coat in his hand. And in my mind, I'm not looking at a coffin or anything like that. I'm looking at two people at an altar in my mind.
Oh, God, John.
Yeah, so that's where I went for that particular show. So again, it's when a show happens in your life and the experiences that you draw from. And I think if you can make that kind of connection to a character, that's the closest you can come to picking a favorite, is when you have those characters that you can connect to.
Absolutely. Well, moving on. Man, that's wow. So we've talked about what you've done within the theater and where you started and where you're at and everything that you've been through. What are your future plans concerning theater? Do you have anywhere you want to go with it? Any other shows that you would like to, audition for and be a part of? Is there anything that you have in your back pocket, or?
Honestly, I don't. I don't really have any future plans. The last show that I did was, it's been almost 4 years ago now at this point. The last full on actual show was Spam-A-Lot that I did, also with Encore down in Morristown, which that one was really cool too. We actually rented some of the costumes that had been used in the London production of that show, and the guy who played King Arthur, there was a little label in one of his pieces. I can't remember what it was, but it actually had the label with Tim Curry's name on it. Yeah, so that was really cool. Yeah, that's the last actual show I did. I've done one or two little singing a song at a fundraiser cabaret kind of thing since then, but not a full show. I think as we get older, we get busy. Sometimes the time commitment required for a show isn't as compatible with where we are in life. We have professional obligations, school obligations, obligations to other people, and sometimes it becomes harder to devote that amount of time, and still be able to maintain healthy relationships and maintain a healthy work-life balance. So it's difficult. I'd love to eventually maybe do something again. Um, as much as I do miss that process of doing a whole show, I'm getting older. My voice is changing. It's sometimes my voice isn't as strong as it used to be, where I haven't sung for so long, that when I do try to sing some of the same stuff I used to, it's just not
Yeah.
the same. So the roles that I would be right for are changing. And just quite frankly, I don't know if I even have the endurance to be able to keep up with a rehearsal process or a full show in the same way that I used to. I couldn't just dive back into something as demanding as American Idiot or something like that. I mean, I would probably destroy my voice beyond repair if I tried to dive back into a show like that, and I might have a heart attack in the process too.
Please don't.
I know, but see, I don't have anything, in the fire at the moment. If not a full show, I could possibly see myself doing maybe just a one night only cabaret kind of thing. I had the opportunity to do something like that a few years ago at the Rose Center down in Morristown. I got to do sort of a one man cabaret thing that was really cool as part of a concert series they do there. I would like to do that again.
I want you to do that again because
I've had some experience, some life
Yeah.
that's happened since that time, so I'm at a different place.
Yeah.
Song selections would absolutely change from where I was then.
Really?
So I don't know. I could honestly see myself writing something as well. I've got a couple projects that I've been kicking around in my mind that I don't know. Eventually, I'm just going to have to get over the fear of it being terrible
Yeah.
and just do it.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise, it'll never happen.
Exactly.
I do not necessarily see myself ever like directing or anything like that. I've tried it. I said before, working with good directors makes all the difference. I know enough about myself to know I am not a good director. I don't do well with moving traffic on stage. I can move myself around stage
Yeah.
all day. I can make character decisions, but I can't communicate that effectively with other people. I know it works for me. So
Right.
yeah, so I don't directing is probably not something that you'll see me doing.
I would really love to see you do a cabaret. That would be absolutely amazing. And as far as writing stuff, I know your talent and I know what you're capable of doing. And I'm here to tell you as a friend, definitely get your stuff out there. Like you have the talent and I guarantee you would have the audience. So don't be scared to do that.
It may have to happen at some point.
I think it may. That's where I'm at. I got real Southern. I think it may. But yeah, no. Well, I definitely know that I would love to see you in something else, even if it is a cabaret show, because you still have so much to offer and so many people that need to hear you.
I need to dust off the vocal cords.
Same.
Yeah, it would be fun,
Yeah.
and I think it would kind of allow me to get back to kind of the part about performing that I like the most, which is finding the right songs
Yeah.
to connect with people. I guess the kind of the one benefit of singing in that style, the sort of cabaret style, because it's very different to
yeah.
doing a show.
Oh
but
yeah.
you don't have to worry about propelling someone else's story forward.
Right.
You're telling your own.
Exactly.
Whether it doesn't have to be original music. Again, like we said before, it could be songs that came about at the right part of your life that now they're stuck with you. They tell that story of your life. So when you go back to tell your own story, it only makes sense to share it in the context of those songs that were so important. So that's kind of the direction that I would probably go. But then again, it would only feel right if I could find some of those people who I'd performed those songs with
Absolutely.
to help me out. I think that would make me the happiest person in the world if I could pull those people back in the room to recreate some of that magic again and share it with people one more time.
Hey, it may not be that hard to do. I know that, especially in this area, it's such a small area, and then the cast and the people that you're in shows with become family, and you become very close. And a lot of the time, you stay in contact with them, and so it's just a special bond that you have, definitely, because all the different theaters, people perform at all of the different theaters and have crossed paths at many different venues and many different stages. And so that's one thing I definitely love about this area, is how small the area is, and with the shows. But man, the area is small, but the talent is huge in this area. It's incredible. I literally would say that there's talent in this area that would rival Broadway in equity, and it's phenomenal. And that's one thing I definitely love about being in this small area here in little East Tennessee.
It's surprising. I think, talking about the shows that we've done at, Encore, or some of the shows that I've done with another company, Glasgow Theater Company, which have done some really groundbreaking things.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things I like most about Glasgow is that, we've never shied away from doing things that may be a bit risky, from premiering new things. So we did the regional premiere of Spring Awakening with Glasgow. I guess that's been close to 6 years ago, I think. Yeah, I think it was. It's been a little while. A risky show for the American South. Deals with lots of topics that aren't always the favorites, and pretty strong language and themes in that show. But again, it's the bonds that you make with those people that you share that story with. I saw a picture that popped up just the other day. It's kind of funny that you and I are having this conversation in the midst of this social media thing where people are nominating their friends to post 10 pictures of a day in the life of a performer.
And you posted your Les Mis one, which is that is one of the best pictures that I've ever seen. So if you haven't seen that picture, I need you to. Okay, continue.
It's the so the picture she's referring to, it's the end of Act 1 at the end of the song One Day More. So the character I played, Angel Ross, he's sort of the leader of the student rebels. And he's standing at the front with his musket raised over his head, with the flag flying in the background, and everyone around him, and everyone's marching. So that's that moment.
It's profile picture worthy,
right? But like Spring Awakening, the picture that I picked for my little 10-day challenge for it was actually right near the end of the show. So the character I played, Melchior. I don't want to give away too much about the story, but so he has people that are very important to him in his life. He has Vendla, who is a love interest, and he has Moritz, who are a best friend. All I'll say is that those characters are no longer with us by the end of the show, and the scene that takes place near the end is actually in a graveyard, and the spirits of these two characters come to Melchior really to save him at the end of the show. And there's a picture where I'm standing in the middle, and Hannah, who's playing Vendla, and Michael, who are playing Moritz, we grasp hands. I grab each of their hands and just pull them across my chest, and we're all three sharing that moment. And that's just one of those moments that, like you said, it's not even at that point, it's almost not even about the story. It's about the experience that you're sharing with those people that you got to perform with.
Yeah, and you saying that literally just gave me chills. Like it's that powerful. Theater has that kind of effect, and it's when you're sharing that, like John has said, with those people, man, it's an incredible feeling.
That's why I would discourage anyone from downplaying within the walls of a quote community theater. Community theater it has a negative connotation, and do not get me wrong, we've all seen some real bad community theater. In terms of maybe the technical quality of the production, or maybe the vocals weren't super tight. But that aside, the people who were involved in that production, even with its shortcomings,
Yeah,
were making their own memories that are going to last
absolutely.
forever and
Oh
making
yeah.
their own friendships.
Oh yeah.
And there is nothing that
Oh
can
yeah.
discount that.
Oh yeah. And like you said, that may have been exactly what they needed at that time,
Exactly.
and may have been what someone else needed exactly at that time. And it's just something that's so special. And some of my best memories are definitely with people that I've shared theater with, because it's a whole different relationship that you have with these people. It's absolutely life changing.
It becomes your family of choice
Oh yeah,
that
so
you surround
accepting.
yourself with.
Yeah, I was accepted more so by people that I've done theater with than I was a lot of other people that are really close to me. They accepted me, in a lot of different facets of my life before anyone else did, and I definitely can't thank them enough for doing that for me. It's wonderful.
They're the ones that you can really turn to. And when you go through, some of these shows again that deal with really emotional, deep content, when you go through those experiences together, it feels so much more natural to share real life
Mm-hmm.
experiences with those people. I mean, they're the
Mm-hmm.
ones that you call to because you've already really been very vulnerable
Oh
around those
yeah.
people. So that wall is kind of already broken.
Mm-hmm.
The ice is broken. You don't feel afraid to open up to these people
Exactly.
because you've all had to just bare yourselves to an audience of hundreds, if not thousands. So what does it matter if you're doing it one on one?
Exactly.
It's just that much easier to have those conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, John, we'll go ahead and start wrapping this up a little bit. But if there's anything else that you would like to say, like, is there any kind of advice that you would give to people who are looking to maybe get into theater, or who may be a little too scared to open themselves up, like you've said, and to put themselves out there and put themselves on a stage in front of an audience? And is there anything that you, as an actor and as a singer and who has done numerous shows, anything that you would give them in the form of advice when it comes to that?
Yeah, there's several things I would say. First, if you have the itch or if you're curious, just try it.
Mm-hmm.
You never know what you can do if you don't try it. Um, when I auditioned for Little Shop, I'd never really sung that in that way in front of people before. Again, I didn't know what an octave felt like vocally on a trumpet. Sure, I knew what that
Mm-hmm.
meant, but like for it to come out of my mouth and for me to have to like control it in that way, I didn't know.
Right.
So it was only by doing it that I learned what I was good at and what I enjoyed. So yeah, that's the first thing I would say is if you feel like you want to try it, just do it. Even if just one time, just to get it out of your system,
Yeah.
just go for it. Um, Second, I would go back to take the process seriously. You're cheating yourself if you don't. You're cheating yourself, you're cheating your castmates, you're cheating your audience if you don't take the process seriously. Learn your lines, dedicate yourself to being as good of a performer as you can be, even if it's your very first time doing it, even if it's a show that you don't feel is quote serious. There's still a lot to be said for dedicating yourself to doing it right.
Oh, yeah.
um, that kind of goes into another piece of advice I would give, and that's taking direction and constructive criticism and notes from directors. Take it graciously and with an open mind. Don't feel like someone's attacking you. I can promise they are telling you something because they want you to be the absolute best you can be. Chances are they've got experience. They know what works. They know what doesn't. They can see sort of the grand scheme of a show going on around you, whereas you're going to be focused on your one part in that moment. So take direction and work with it. Don't assume that you know better than your director. That's just not a healthy relationship to have. Um, and I guess the next piece would be along those lines. Don't assume you don't have anything new to learn.
Amen.
No matter how many shows you've done, um, you're you may have a world of experience under your belt. You may have performed groundbreaking works in front of massive audiences. You may have gotten standing ovations. But when you walk into the rehearsal room for the first rehearsal of that next project, you're on the same level as everybody else. You have new things that you can learn about yourself, about your craft. Maybe a role requires you to do something vocally that you've never done before. I think beyond that, I would really encourage people to keep themselves grounded and keep their expectations realistic. Um, I think people, if they experience a certain level of, let's say, success in the theater, um, they can start to expect too much of themselves,
Right.
and they start to not have fun with the process.
Yeah.
It becomes kind of a burden to them. They feel a need to for lightning to strike twice, I guess. So I think they need to keep their expectations realistic. No one is expecting you to walk out and earn a Tony Award on every performance. I mean, the people who reach the highest levels of performing, whether it be Broadway, West End, that win those Tony Awards, they've had a long way to go. They've had their ups, and they've had probably more downs.
Oh yeah.
So keep those expectations realistic. And lastly, just be your own biggest fan, but keep your ego in check. There's always going to be bigger fish in bigger ponds. So if you walk into the room feeling like you are the absolute best singer, best actor, and you want to make sure everyone else knows it, I hate to tell you, but you're going to have a lot more people in that room that would like to see you fail than who want to see you succeed. So if you go in the room with the mindset of wanting to lift everyone else up, you'll have a much better experience. And just never think that you are too good for where you are, because like we've said throughout the discussion today, it may be exactly where you need to be at that moment, and it may be exactly where someone else needs to be at that moment. So don't allow your ego to get in the way of that experience.
Absolutely. Don't be your own biggest obstacle. And that's goes right along with what John was saying, and that's everything he said is something that I would say, and he knows. He knows his stuff. He's good at what he does, and it has actually been one of the best times I've had in a long time talking to you, because I learned some new stuff too, which is I've known John for years, like I said, and so he was saying some stuff and I was like, oh, well, there's that. Well, thank you, John, again for doing this. And here in the next few weeks, I'm going to actually be talking to a couple more people who are in the world of theater here on the Theater Ovation podcast. So look out for those. And there will also be some vlogs coming up and some more reviews that I've done from where I went to New York City last week. It was amazing. So yeah, definitely keep a lookout for those, and we will be back soon speaking with some more talented and passionate people here on the Theater Ovation. Thanks, guys.